I don't care if God says so. What makes your God moral? Just because he does it, it's moral? If God told you to go and murder me, would you do it?
I would, because I'm receiving a divine commandment,
Right.
right? So it's
And
like
this
it's
is
something where yo, I don't know if you remember me, but I debated you, I think like a couple of years back.
were you PaleoCon John?
Yeah.
Oh, what's up, man? Yeah, I remember.
Hey,
I
yeah.
debated you back when I was just kind of getting my feet wet in that whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, what's up? You're over here to defend God to me.
Yeah, well, I just saw on like in your Instagram, right? You said you were asking some question about Christianity or whatever. You're looking for Christians.
Yeah. My first question is,
So,
do you think that God determines morality?
uh, like, what do you mean by that?
Like, do you think that morality is dictated by the Bible and by God?
I would say like
You're really low and you keep like cutting out a little bit.
I would say that God gives like moral laws, right? So then, like, if you're Christian, you like truly believe in those moral laws, you should follow them,
So are
right?
these moral laws exclusive to Christians, or do you think that all of society should be following God's moral laws?
Well, because I believe God and I believe in like the Christian faith, right? I would want everybody to come to the Christian faith and follow those laws.
Okay.
So I think it would be in the best interest of all the people in society to follow those laws so that they can obtain salvation.
Okay, God. Okay, got it. Sorry.
No, you're good.
What do you consider some of God's moral laws? Because usually I always go next to the question of homosexuality.
Okay, wait. So do you want to just ask like specifically about homosexuality? Do you want me to just like list off like random shit?
I
Like,
mean, you can list off a couple, but I usually focus on homosexuality because most Christians I talk to, and correct me if I'm wrong, how do you feel about homosexuality? Because most Christians I talk to would say it's a sin.
yeah. So I would say that like homosexual acts are a sin. Do I think like do I hate the sinner? No, but I think like that. Yeah, like homosexuality, like the homosexual acts are a sin because they're a perversion of the reproductive act.
Okay, so if they're a perversion of a reproductive act, do you feel as though it's also a sin for people to get married if, say, the husband had a vasectomy?
Yeah.
Okay, so you think it's a sin to get married and not reproduce?
Well, hold on. So what do you mean by like? So for example, like if you had like two people get married, right? And like a man and a woman, and then they like were trying to have children, right? And then like they it didn't work. Like I wouldn't say that's immoral because
No,
that
what if
like the
like so
attempt was
so
there.
there's I bring up this stat also. I think it's somewhere around like 1 in 4,000 women are born without a uterus. It's just something that happens sometimes with as many people are being born. So would it be a sin for that woman to marry a man because she's incapable of procreating?
Yeah, I don't think those people should get married.
Okay, so you think that marriage is just about procreation. Why is
Well,
that?
I think there's a little bit more to it. I mean, not only is it well, like part of it is about procreation, but it's also so that the two people can help each other obtain salvation.
So why couldn't they do that if they can't? Why couldn't they obtain salvation while simultaneously not being able to procreate?
Because you're not going into like essentially you're not going like into the like what marriage really means. Like so for example, like a friendship, like so say like the two of us are good friends even though we're not. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like part of that friendship is that we lead each other to salvation, right? So like the main focus of friendship is to lead the other person to salvation, right? But when I go into like a marital sort of contract, that involves like a procreative thing. So marriage is in some way, I think it's fair to say you have to be like somewhat like friends with the person that you marry, right?
Uh-huh.
And then there's also another part to it that adds the procreation. So the point, I guess, so I guess technically, yeah, like the point of like marrying is for like the procreative acts, but it's also like part of a good marriage that you have like a good friendship and all these different things. So
Okay, but
if
I'm
you
not sure how procreation has anything to do with leading to salvation. Are you talking about like the
oh
moral?
no
Are you talking about like the moral obligation to have a family? Could you?
oh so I was saying those are two separate things. So it's like you have like so something can have like two different like ends that it's working towards, right? So like marriage, it can like one of the ends it works towards is procreation, and then a separate end is bring the other person to salvation. Now those
But why does it have? I understand the bringing to salvation thing. I'm more interested in the procreation thing because I'm wondering why. What does that have to do with anything? Why is it necessary that people get married must procreate? And if you're talking about procreating, I would be curious further if do you mean actually procreating biologically you too, or could you adopt? Because that's still
well I
having a
would
family, right?
so I mean I would say that like you should be open to procreation and all like sexual acts within marriage.
Well, I'm
That's
talking
kind of
about
the
the
main point.
hypothetical I already gave you, like a woman who's literally born
So
without a uterus.
yeah, so I again I don't think that person should enter into a marriage.
Why? Just because they can't procreate, why couldn't they adopt?
Yeah, because it's not like I don't know, like it's kind of like a perversion of like the proper order of like the nature of humans, right? Because like what you want to do is you want to continue your legacy, you want to create more of you, and then
But this sounds like
continue
I'm sorry
yourself
to
through
keep cutting
that.
you off, but this sounds more like a appeal to like our evolutionary design.
But God also designed the way in which humans procreate and evolve. I don't see why
Well,
that those two
throughout
totally
evolution,
different things.
there are plenty of animals that have sex for social reasons. Also, it's not only about procreating.
What do you mean for social reasons? I don't know what you mean by that.
Like chimps, for example, will engage in even homosexual sex purely for bonding in the community. Same with lions. Male lions will have sex with each other to strengthen the pack, whatever they're called, the pride. Um,
Yeah, sure. So I would say that there's some level of within living things,
Hold
right?
on,
So I would say that
you
it.
keep cutting. I'm sorry you keep cutting out, like going
Oh,
really. It sounds like you're like really far away, then really close.
okay. Am I good now?
Yeah, if you're holding your phone or something, you might just want to set it down. I'm not trying to be rude or anything. I want to make sure I'm hearing you.
Oh no, you're good, bro. Yeah. So what I was saying is that I think there's some level of like hierarchy of animals. I think there's like a like humans, of course, would be at the top, and then you can go down however you want. But because humans have a rational nature,
Mm-hmm.
right? They have more of like a they don't like it's like opposed to a beastly nature, right? So like a beastly nature would be like you see like beasts in nature are like raping each other. They're like killing each other indiscriminately just for food. I think you would say that humans, because of their rational nature, can act above that and they can act according to their rational nature. So I would say that because we see with all these beasts, they're doing all these like crazy, like whatever things with like the sexual act.
Mm-hmm.
They're like killing people indiscriminately, right? Like we would say that humans should act in some way above that in accordance with their rational nature,
Yes,
right?
I agree with you
So
completely. That like basically what you're saying, long story short, is we're not slaves to evolution or our evolutionary purpose. So I'm wondering why you brought up the it's unnatural thing a minute ago. What natural hierarchy or natural requirement is there that all humans procreate? And also, furthermore, I thought that it was a religious standard to have people get married as well. So by what you're saying is unless you have the ability to procreate, even if that ability is lost due to something like you had to have your uterus removed for an emergency or you were just born without one or whatever, then they just shouldn't get married?
yeah, I don't think they should get married in at least like the religious context because you have to remember there's two um types of marriage, right? So you can have like a religious marriage and there's also like a civil marriage.
Like a
Do you
state.
understand?
Like, I understand what you're
Yeah,
saying, but
yeah.
marriage is
So
primarily a state institution.
wait, what do you mean? So wait, no, but there's like two. Wait, hold on. Say that again.
Marriage is a state institution because it's the state that manages marriage now and hands out marriage licenses. It's the state that ultimately determines your marriage's value valid. It really has nothing to do with the religious aspect.
Well, that's not exactly true because you can be civilly married, and well, I'm Catholic, so I don't think this exactly works the same way when you're Protestant, but when you're Catholic, there's actually like a Catholic marriage, right? So it's a marriage in the eyes of God and the church. And then there's also a civil marriage. So, like, say, for example, you had like two like Protestants get married and they got civilly married, and say they both converted to Catholicism, they would still have to get Catholic married, right? So there's like a distinction in the types of marriage, right? So I would say in most marriages, the state is probably the primary institution that handles that, at least for things like tax purposes and all that. But in like a more of a metaphysical bond marriage,
Hmm.
that's actually taken by the church hierarchy.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I'm not as familiar with the Catholic traditions or whatever, but I guess my only
Okay,
question
yeah.
following up with that is you said you do think that people should all follow God's moral laws. So would you
So yeah,
prefer as though everybody was married as far as a Catholic marriage?
yeah, I would say that I would want everyone who, fulfills like the requirements for a good marriage. So obviously, like, I don't want like some like dude who's gonna like kill his wife, get married, and like screw that girl over or
Well, of
whatever.
course, but
But
I'm
yeah,
getting really hung up on the procreation thing because what you're saying to me is that people who are born a certain way who just can't give birth are somehow acting in a violation of God's moral laws.
yeah, because they're not following like what is required of marriage properly,
But why is that
right? So like a
required of
marriage,
marriage? I would
because it's
understand
just
if you said marriage requires having a family, but then what's wrong with adopting? There are a lot of kids that need homes.
well, I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with adopting. Like, I think if like you're having like your own family and you're producing children, if you like adopt a kid on top of that, I don't think that's
No, no, no. What if you don't
horrible,
have any
right? But
kids?
yeah,
You do not reproduce biologically, you and your wife do not reproduce, but you're both like really good friends. You both have sex for pleasure. You both believe in Catholicism or whatever, and then you decide to adopt a kid instead of having one. Maybe the wife, maybe it's not even that she doesn't have a uterus. Maybe it's that she says, you know what, I feel as though I have like very fragile bones. I don't know if I could uh, handle giving birth to a child. So let's take a alternative route. Why is that bad?
well, does she feel like that, or is that actually the case?
Even if she purely said, I'm not interested in giving birth myself, I would rather adopt.
Well then she's not properly following the like what you should do in a marriage.
But
That's
why do
what
you
I'm
have to
saying.
do that in a marriage?
Because that's what's taught. Like that's God's teaching. Like that's what God wants for marriage. So if you
Why
just
does God,
disagree with
wait,
that,
stop. Why does God want that?
why does God want that?
Why does God require that people procreate in a marriage?
Because he wants people's legacies to continue on, and then like through that, like the faith can spread.
Your
And
legacy
it's
can
also just
continue
like
on
a
by adopting.
not in the same way, because it's not making another of you. Like
It doesn't
you
have to
someone
be. If
else
the
made
goal is
another of
to,
themselves.
no, if the goal is to further propagate your message, essentially, what you're saying is that it's important to procreate because you need to have more humans that you then can raise as being Catholic so that they can also continue to spread this religion. And that's sort of your legacy. You can do that with adoption.
No, there's still another part of your legacy that you're making another of you.
I just don't understand
So it's
why
not
this is required. And also, no, a child is not another one of you. Children
well
are
it
unique creatures. They
well
have
yeah, I
separate
know I
DNA and
know and in the
whatnot.
strict sense it's not another one of you, but like it carries your genes. Does that make sense? So it's like when you reproduce, like there's genes that are carried over,
Yes, but I don't
right?
know
So
what
yeah,
why
yeah.
is
So
that important?
strictly, it's not another. Why is that important?
Why does that matter? If your goal is to spread more of your religious beliefs, you could do the exact same thing by adopting a tiny, tiny little baby and raising that child with your exact same values in hopes that they continue spreading the word. They would still have your name. They would still be associated as, like, legally recognized as your child. Why does it have to be a biological thing? When the goal seems to be to propagate your religion, you can do that through adoption.
Well, it's one goal, right? Something can have more than one goal. Does that make sense? So it's like if I can like enter into something, I can like want to get this thing and then get this thing, get this thing. So sure, if you adopted, right,
Mm-hmm.
you could spread the gospel through that, but there's also some level of beauty in making another like yourself.
Yeah, but hold
right?
on.
That
Wait,
God
wait.
wants for you.
Some
Well, because
level of
God. Well,
beauty in doing
can I?
that, it does not
Can I?
follow that that is a moral obligation.
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, I was about to qualify that if you could let me finish real quick. So what I was saying was that there's a certain beauty in it, and because God recognizes the beauty in it,
Hmm.
he gives the command to be fruitful and multiply. Now, through adoption, you're not being fruitful and multiplying. Someone else was doing so, and then you just took that kid on. So you take the part of that original covenant and you want to continue that. Now, sure, you could also adopt on top of that, and that's great if you want to, help that kid become saved at some point, and then through that kid, spread the faith and
But we keep going back to
help
the
other
exact
people
same
become
thing,
saved.
right? Is I
Wait, no,
understand that
what?
God's commands are be fruitful and multiply. I get that. But what
Yeah, sure.
qualify that? Why is that a necessity? So far, the only argument you've given me is because we need to
Wait, why is
fulfill.
that a necessity? Wait,
Because
just
we
because
wait,
you
wait, wait,
said
wait, hold
so.
on. The only qualification you've given me thus far is because we need to continue to propagate ourselves and our beliefs. You can propagate your beliefs through adoption. Why is this required? Just if God
Well,
recognizes it as beautiful, why is God
wait, hold
telling us
on.
to be fruitful and multiply?
Wait, hold on. Aren't we talking about this in the context of something that's already dictated from that God, right? So whatever he dictates would just be the way in which you do it. Like it doesn't. I don't need to give reasons necessarily for
Well,
why
if you're
God would do such a thing.
yeah,
Like
no,
I don't
if
see. I
that
don't like
that's
see the necessity for that.
this is the same problem I run into with Christians all the time is you do need to give a reason. So for
Wait,
example,
why?
because that's how you logically come to a conclusion. You don't just follow some authority because book says so. So for example, when God says thou shalt not murder, I can explain from a secular perspective why murder is bad. I don't need to say, well, because God says so, that means murder's bad. I'm able to reason as to why murder is bad. So you need to reason as to why it is required for you to be fruitful and multiply. You can still, quote unquote, multiply through adoption.
I don't think you're actually multiplying through adoption because somebody else was multiplying, and you're just adding that on to what you already had.
You're
Like you're not
raising
really
the child as
multiplying in the
your
same
own.
way.
You're raising the child with
Yeah,
your own
but you're
morals and
not.
beliefs.
But you're not physically multiplying.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, but you still haven't demonstrated as to why that's important to God. People are
Well, it's
saying
important
for Hunter,
because he.
qualify means justified under my worldview. That seems dishonest. Okay, if your answer is unironically just because God says so,
Yeah, well, isn't it true that you're trying to qualify under your worldview? So if you don't agree with my worldview, you wouldn't understand. Like if I had your worldview, I don't think it would be necessary. But because I have a certain faith, right? Like I believe it's necessary because I have faith in that being that said it's necessary, right? So Christianity is not something you can just reason out. If it were, then philosophers of the past would have reasoned to exactly what it says in the Bible, but they did not. There has to be some level of revelation that comes.
so there needs to be faith.
Yeah, there needs to be some level of faith to
And
that.
this is the same problem I run
Yeah.
into every single time I have a discussion with a Christian. Is because you're
Uh,
now telling me
wait, your
that
problem with Christianity is that you have to have faith to believe in it.
yes,
And that doesn't
having
really
faith
make
is just a
sense. That's kind
lame
of
excuse
dumb.
for not having evidence. So when you come out here and
Wait.
say,
Well,
hold on,
evidence
when you
for
come out here and say you would prefer people live by God's moral laws, and then you say that homosexuality is a sin because God says, and because God says we need to procreate, you haven't demonstrated the importance of this at all. All you've said is because God says so.
wait, so because I don't have some like overly materialistic justification for some metaphysical being's actions that discredits the metaphysical being that
Do you think that if
naturally
the metaphysical
collectively
being is
above
giving you
human.
all kinds of commands and they are the biggest or most powerful being in existence, don't you think that that being would also act logically and reasonably? God apparently gave us logic.
Sure, but the ability for us to know of truths is not at the same level of a greater metaphysical being.
I'm not saying you
So
need to
it's like so.
understand fully the greater metaphysical being. I'm saying that you
Wait,
need
yeah,
to.
you are.
No,
Wait,
I'm
you
not. I'm
are.
saying you need to be able to qualify more so as to why it's required to procreate. Because I would say, hey, homosexuality, one, there's nothing wrong with it. Two, you can claim it's a sin, but there's no actual harm done by that, so I don't know what makes it a sin. Second of all, or thirdly, if you're interested in fulfilling your legacy, then you can do that through adoption. Is God like against
Wait.
adoption
Hold
now?
on. Let's go through. We'll go through this. So your worldview. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you're like an atheist, like at least like mostly like materialistic individual, right?
I mean, I don't want to like commit to being materialistic. That sounds a little
Yeah,
weird,
I'm not.
but
No. I'm not trying to like trap you, but you believe like solely in like material, like that. There's only like a material world. There's not like some sort of like metaphysical existence or whatever.
yes, because I can observe and test the physical world. You're not even positive that there is a metaphysical world. None of us are sure.
Okay, sure. Well, I don't need you to justify your belief. I'm just asking like for clarification so I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah,
Here.
if you're talking
So
about my morals and values are based
yeah,
primarily on this physical earth, then yes.
right. So if in your view, right, if you take your view as a given, like sure it may be right that some of these things are totally fine because there's no harm done and you have a different view of morality and such, but because there's faith in something higher in my worldview, I'm working off a different set of premises for my logic, right? So essentially, like I think we're gonna reach like a fundamental disagreement where you're like, oh, like this is wrong, like this isn't wrong because of like no harm done, but that's not exactly how I view something. Like I don't think that something's only wrong insofar as it does harm to like some material thing. Like I think like certain sexual sins are wrong because they corrupt the soul,
But you don't know if
right?
there
Like
is a
an
soul.
immaterial.
You can't demonstrate that. You can't prove that. Whereas I'm able to tangibly
I
demonstrate how
think
your beliefs
I think
harm
you
gay
can.
people.
I think you can demonstrate that there's a soul. I don't know if you want to go into that argument,
I,
but
I would be curious to know how you could demonstrate there is a soul. But furthermore, I feel like this is a circular argument. I think that this is why we're having a fundamental disagreement, is because
what's it?
for you, because God said so is enough. But when I read the Bible, I see God acting in ways that I don't think is very moral.
Okay, I mean we can argue about the Bible if you want because I feel like you're probably reading the Bible at face value and you don't understand any figurative or metaphorical meanings
No, I
that
try
are
to,
going on.
but
So
I'm pretty sure the
you
literal
tried to
story about like Pharaoh is a literal story, is it not?
story like which aspect of it though?
The fact that God directly hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he could manifest his miracles, and in doing so, he killed innocent firstborn sons of the region.
Sure. Yeah. So like so are you asking like whether or not that story like happened in the exact way that it did?
Well, I'm wondering, are you going to tell me that that's more or less a literal thing, or are you saying it's all
So
metaphorical or whatever?
I think like parts of it are literal, parts of it are metaphorical. I think if you have like I don't want to get too much into complex theology. I don't know if that's like the road you want to go down for like the specific story.
No, the reason.
Um,
Oh, sorry. Go
but
ahead.
yeah. So I mean, like in the case, like we'll start with like the hardening of the heart. Um, on how God interacts with the wills of men is that if for good acts, He is able to actually produce the willing and the act within the individual, and then for evil acts, He's allowing that like He basically makes His grace absent so that the individual is acting on accord with his own fallen nature in order to perform evil acts. So I would say the hardening of Pharaoh's heart would God like not giving him any grace to act in a good manner, so that he is then doing evil things,
Okay,
right?
so
So
even if I were to
I
grant
assume
that,
that's
then how does that justify a moral God killing the firstborn sons of the region when they had absolutely fuck all to do with this?
well. What's your interpretation of where morality comes from?
I'm asking you, do you think that God acted in a
Why
moral
I
way
think
in that story because he's God?
I think if God's the arbiter of morality, then he cannot act immorally.
Okay, so then we're back to the circular reasoning, which is so long as God does it, it's okay.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
yeah.
and
No,
that
I
is
mean that's the
no,
faith
that's
in
textbook
omnipotent and
illogical, because now you're in this situation where not only is it debatable whether or not God hardened Pharaoh's heart, even if I were to grant you that, okay, God just gave him over to his sinful nature or whatnot, now you're telling me that murder essentially is moral because God did it. How does that make any sense? And why should I now follow this God whom you claim is the arbiter of morals when it comes to whether or not people can be gay or whether or not people can get married even though they aren't able to procreate?
Well, because it's something you have to take on faith, right?
Okay.
So again,
there's
it's
no
like when you,
logic here at all. You cannot logically argue this at all. That's what I'm hearing.
what I'm saying is that Christianity has two aspects. There's faith and reason, so that
Where's
you
the
can reason
reason?
about.
I don't
Well, you
care
can
about
have
the faith.
reason.
Give me some reason.
Well, you can have reason about the things you have faith in,
So give
right?
me
But the
the
thing is
reason
that
as to
is that
why
you,
God is the arbiter of morals when he acts in ways that seem to be pretty objectively immoral.
well, because it's on account of God's nature of what his being requires, right? Because if you have like some sort of omnipotent, omnibenevolent, and what's the other omni?
Omniscient?
Omniscient. Yeah, there you go. If you have a God that's the triomni God, right? It follows from his nature that he is all like he like his acts would follow upon his nature, right? So when you interpret his acts, you have to interpret them in accord with his nature,
So his
right?
nature is killing children.
Who are you as an authority to say that some act is wrong when a triomni God does that action? Like, who are you? Like, what authority do you have over morality to
I
say
don't
that
think that I
his
have
morality?
authority over this, but I'm questioning your God's morality because what you're now telling me is that God is acting in ways that contradict the morals he gave us. So God says, "Thou shalt not murder." God also says, "Vengeance is mine." God went and took revenge, and God literally murdered innocent children so that he could multiply his miracles. Why? What makes this moral?
What makes this well simply because he did it because he's an omnibenevolent God.
Okay, so we keep on
So
going
so
exactly
yeah,
down the same exact fucking.
exactly
No,
because
this is the brain dead route that we go down every fucking time. And this is why I have a problem with people like you, is because you come up here and say homosexuality or homosexual acts are bad because it's a perversion, and it's bad, you see, because God. That's not good enough. I don't care if God says so. What makes your God moral? Just because he does it, it's moral? If God told you to go and murder me, would you do it?
I would because I'm receiving a divine commandment,
Right.
right? So it's
And
like
this
it's
is
something where, yeah,
this is
no,
this
yeah,
no no no,
no,
it's
it's
funny.
like
You're literally like a parody of everything that I have issues with Christians. You know, there are already studies, for example, that show that Christians are far more likely to engage in aggressive and violent behavior if they feel that that violence is sanctioned by their God. You're falling into that statistic right now.
wait. Wouldn't that be the case with like every like take like Muslims for example? Like, what do you think 9/11 was? Like, don't like single out
Wait,
Christians.
it's not just Christians. Yes, all religions are cancer, but right now we're talking about the religion in the sense of Christianity. And again, when you come up and say homosexual acts are a sin
Yeah.
because God says so, I have a
Well, it's a little bit
problem
more.
with that.
It's a little bit more complicated than just that.
This is what you just said. If God does it, it's impossible for God to act immorally. So if God does it, it's moral. That's what you said.
Oh yeah, that's true. But like, there's other arguments as to why homosexuality would be immoral.
I thought that it doesn't
Like,
matter
there's
if it results in harm or not. I thought it's based on God's divine command. That's what you told me a minute ago.
it can matter if something results in harm, but I'm just saying it's not the sole factor in determining sin, right?
But
Because this
according
the
to
factor.
no, because according to you, if you are able to demonstrate to me that being homosexual results in harm, that does not determine whether or not it is immoral.
No, not intrinsically. I'm just saying that like there's something else going on. Like, do you want me to give you those arguments? I'm just saying like there's something else going on. Like, you don't just argue sin based solely upon harm, like physical harm.
No. Well,
Like, there's
I
other
know
things.
that. Well, that's how I do it. But I understand that.
Oh,
But the problem is
okay.
that you're saying because God acts in a way, even when God acts in ways that are harmful, like killing the firstborn sons, it's moral because God does it. So I find it a little bit contradictory for you to then be like, well, being homosexual is bad because God says it's a sin and because it results in harm XYZ. According to what you just told me, even if it results in harm, that doesn't necessarily mean it's immoral.
Yeah, no, just because something involves harm doesn't mean it's immoral. If someone breaks into my house and I shoot him, that's not immoral. Yet harm was caused.
I understand that. And then we'd be on the conversation of like utilitarianism and broader harm, because if we live in a society in which you cannot defend your own property, that would propagate far more harm than the minuscule harm that results from shooting an intruder to defend yourself. I understand all that, but the problem
Yeah,
is
I mean,
you're not,
sure.
no, you're not appealing to harm or no harm. And now you're saying because God did something that is harmful, it's okay because God did it. So I don't want to hear your arguments as to why you think being homosexual is harmful.
Well, wait, why do I have to choose between harm and no harm? Wait, what's like why do you
You said that
what's
that's not how
your
you determine your morals.
Yeah, so harm is not the standard by which we determine sinfulness.
Okay. Yeah. You
So
determine
there's another
sinfulness based on
stand.
if God says so or not.
Well, no, there's a little more. I mean, there's reasons for why God said certain things, right? I mean, he's not
Yes.
like completely doing things like arbitrarily,
Well, I agree
but
that
but
usually
it's
a lot of the
not.
sins that God lays out and calls sins do actually result in a tangible harm, but not
Oh, well,
being
that
gay.
that could be the case. Well, that could be the case that a given sin involves harm, right? But that's not the standard by which we measure whether or not something's a sin. Whether or not harm is caused is accidental to the nature of sin.
So how do you qualify something as being a sin?
How do you qualify as something as being a sin?
Yes, because if somebody
Well,
asked me
well,
what makes this a sin, quote unquote, I would say, well, it results in harm, XYZ, this is why.
yeah. Well, I think you could say like at least generally in like a universal sense, as you said, obviously it would have to be an offense to God, but we can look at why each sin would be an offense to God, right? Because like there's different reasons, but that's the universal thing by which you categorize the things,
So why
right?
is
So
acting
then,
in a homosexual relationship a sin to God? Why does that offend God or whatever?
well, because it's a perversion of the means by the sorry, it's a perversion of the means to reproduction that he developed, right? So you're perverting that sexual act.
Okay, so purely because you don't have the ability to procreate, we're kind of back on the same argument, that makes it an offense to God.
Oh, not only is it that you don't have an ability to procreate, you're perverting the act, right? So it's a different thing where if you have like normal like vaginal intercourse, right? But it just so happens that for whatever reason like the girl doesn't get pregnant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, like that's not a perversion of the reproductive act, right? But it's a clear perversion when I'm not going to go get vulgar, but like a homosexual sex would be a perversion um of that reproductive act,
And you're
right?
determining that
So
it is a perversion solely because of the lack of ability to procreate.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah,
Well,
we're kind of at this
also
point we're
well,
going
well
back in
wait,
no 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 at
can I
this point we're
can I
going
say
in
something real quick?
circles because now we're
Wait,
going
can I just say one thing? It's not just part of the perversion that it's not open procreation, right? So it's not just that it doesn't procreate, it's not open to the idea of procreation. It's perverting the procreative
so
act.
then we're back in the same thing, which is infertile people getting married, even if it's a man
Yeah,
or a
well
woman, is also a
they shouldn't.
perversion. Is also a
Yeah,
perversion.
they should not get married because marriage in large part a requirement of it is that it is something that's open to procreation. And if you already know beforehand that there's something that will prevent procreation, well, you shouldn't enter into that religious marriage. No, I'm
So
not
is it
saying
a
those people
perversion to
shouldn't
have
be.
sex with a condom?
Yeah,
If you're married,
yeah, it
if you're
is.
married and you have let's say like and you don't want to have a kid right now and you have sex with a condom, that's
Yeah,
a sin. That's a
yeah,
perversion.
yeah, because it's not open to the to procreation.
Okay, yeah. Then what I would just say is, I mean, at this point, we're so circular. It kind of just ends with me saying, "Well, fuck your God," because I don't give a shit. Because if you're going to
Okay.
tell
Well,
me that
the thing is,
no, because if you're going to tell me that it's determined whether or not it's a perversion based on the ability to procreate, then now we've left out people who want to get married but were maybe born without a uterus, or maybe had some kind of cancer in their uterus, or maybe they had testicular
yeah.
cancer and they had to have their balls removed so they can't procreate. You're telling me that's a perversion. And on top of this, you're saying
Well, no, no,
it's
no, no.
no, no,
Well,
no, let
that's
me
not.
finish,
Well,
please.
that
Because
itself
hold
isn't a
on, wait
perversion. It's
just a
trying
second.
to do. Okay.
Because you're also saying now that it's a perversion to have sex in a marriage if you don't plan on procreating, which means that you just have to keep on fucking pumping out babies at the end of the day.
Well, it's not. I don't think you want to say plan on procreating. I think that's kind of strong language. You have to be open to it. So, like when you enter into the act, you don't necessarily desire like a child to come out of it, but you must be open to a child coming out of that. Does that
I
make
don't
sense?
understand. I do, but I don't understand why this could not equally apply to gay people who are open to the idea of adopting. Like, you realize it's your religious beliefs that it's a sin to wear a condom, have a bunch of babies that result in like an influx of kids in orphanages, right? Like, this seems completely counterintuitive.
Wait, sorry, what'd you say? You kind of cut out there for a second.
I said it's your type of beliefs that it's a sin to use protection, so you have to keep pumping out babies, which partially contributes to an influx of children who are in orphanages or in the foster care system.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, 'cause I feel like a lot of those orphans are resulting probably from uh like like extramarital sex or like premarital sex or something, right? So I'm saying that sex should be reserved for something that's within marriage, right? So then if you're assuming that something's like there is like a marriage, right? Like they would probably be able to raise the kids, right? So I don't think that directly is contributing to the orphanages. I think if anything, if we promoted um like abstinence until marriage, right? And just wait and just wanted people to perform the reproductive act within marriage, it would lead to a large decrease in the amount of people in orphanages. I think that at that point, the majority of people who would be left within the orphanages would just be children whose family members died or something.
I know. Well, that would be probably the most ideal, which is you only ever have sex to procreate, but that literally is not how this works. Second of all, they already tried this back in the 80s with the Ronald Reagan had a whole campaign dedicated to this, and we didn't see any kind of decreases in out of wedlock sexual engagement. I guess I'd ask one more question, which is have you seen the whole thing going on with Dave Rubin? Do you think that's a sin? Because he's using his semen to reproduce.
I kind of heard about it. Could you just catch me up so I can answer the question properly?
Yeah, so Dave Rubin, he's gay. He's married to another man.
Yeah.
And they impregnated a woman via surrogacy using their semen.
Okay, so you're asking whether or not that's an immoral act?
Would that be an immoral act according to you or your God?
I would say yes because it's not within the proper context of marriage.
So it has to be a man or a woman.
In that are married, yes. Man and woman.
Does it have to
married
just be
to each
one
other.
man, one woman?
Yeah, one man, one woman in the context of marriage. That's
Okay,
the
but
argument.
this, oh my God. So then why the fuck did God give Solomon multiple wives?
Well, so here's where you kind of get into a different argument about like how things worked in the Old Testament. So in certain um, things that become more moral by necessity, right? So say for example, well, I think this is the most simple example. I used this one earlier. If you guy break into your house, you can shoot and kill him, right? So in most cases, just shooting and killing a guy is immoral, but the necessity dictates that in that specific case, it is a moral act,
Didn't he ask
right?
for
So
more
I
wives?
so
I thought that God like blessed him with multiple wives.
yeah. So here, can like let me just like finish my explanation here. So essentially, part of the reason why polygamy was such a big thing in the Old Testament was that there was a requirement for the Jewish people to be able to like reproduce more, right? So because like there weren't very many of them, so they had to keep going so that in order they could like continue going on and be able to eventually spread, um, like truth to other nations, right?
Uh-huh.
So, but once Christ came in the new covenant, he made polygamy not an issue, right? Because the necessity was no like I mean, sorry, he made polygamy an issue because the necessity was no longer there,
Well, yeah,
right?
because I mean, I've read the New
So
Testament also about how marriage
yeah,
is
yeah.
sort of
So
analogous to the church, right?
it's supposed to represent like Christ in his relationship to the church, right? So you want your
Mm-hmm.
marriage to, sort of
parallel that. No,
emulate that. Yeah.
yeah,
So
but do
so
you?
right.
No, I'm sorry to keep cutting you off, Paleocon John, but don't you see the additional issue with this now? So now it's a sin for atheists to get married.
Well, they wouldn't be able to get Catholic married, right? So I think
I don't
civil
care
marriage
about
is something
Catholic
that's going
marriage.
to.
Yeah.
No, but this is something. This is an important distinction, right? Because I don't think it's a sin to get civilly married to somebody. It's only what you would do within that civil marriage. That's what I'm saying. So it's like so somebody like basically what civil marriage almost essentially is like some sort of like tax thing, right? Like so the government can like tax people correctly. Like I don't think like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a metaphysical bond between two individuals. And I understand you don't understand that because you're a materialist.
That's not true. I mean, no, I don't understand the metaphysical part, but I understand having a strong bond with your partner. But the thing is I think that
Well,
you can have
doesn't
that
that
while
show
being
you?
gay, and I think that you can also have that without procreating.
Thing is what I'm saying though. You can have a strong bond with somebody, sure. Like I can have a strong bond with my homies. We can want each other to become saved and such. But it's not like something where I'm going to have such a great metaphysical connection to this one person, and I'm going to actively will their salvation and procreate children that I will also will the salvation of. I think that's something that's a lot different than just having a good bond with somebody, which I think having a good bond with someone is great. I'm sure your bond with Carissa is fantastic.
It to
But I
me
would say
sounds like
that
what you're saying is the most crucial element here for religion is being able to raise a child with your same beliefs. And then we're going to just go back into a circle of I think that you could do that just the same with adoption.
wait, what? Wait. I don't know if that was the claim that I made. What was that claim again?
I thought that your overall point here is that you need to raise a child that you can raise holding the same beliefs as you. I'm not
Well,
repeating what you said verbatim.
yeah. Well, that's important. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So this is
But is that the be all end all? I don't think so. But it's something that's important, I would say. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you coming on here, but you've pretty much more or less just demonstrated every single fucking problem that I have with Christians.
Well,
like,
but where does that problem truly lie? Is because there's no material explanation for metaphysical
you should
truth.
be able to give me a
like,
material explanation as to why it's bad to be gay, why it's bad for gay people to raise kids,
So
and why it's
so
required that you procreate in a marriage. Yes.
well, I gave you a material explanation to some extent about the homosexuality, right? Is that it's a perversion of the sexual act that was endowed upon the material world,
Which was endowed.
right?
You're
So
appealing to God again. I don't care if it's a
wait, so
perversion
okay,
to some
yeah, I
spiritual
have
endowed thing. The point of the
because
matter
I
is that
believe
being gay doesn't follow with any material, tangible harms to the gay person.
well, okay, fine. Then you can make like an evolutionary argument if you want to make an ultimate focus upon materialistic truths as being, like the material world being the sole arbiter of truth. Then sure, I think that because gay people can't reproduce, I think that shows that they're not doing that which they're ordered towards, which is reproduction. Because
This
the point of
doesn't make sense again.
evolution.
You keep
Well, no,
just, I think that you should just stop talking at this point because
no, the
I already
point.
brought up the fact that in nature, animals engage in homosexual behavior because sex is not
They don't
only, it does not only exist to procreate.
their end. They
Huh?
don't reach their end through that act. It's an
It doesn't
unfulfilling act.
matter. It doesn't matter. Not every sexual
Wait.
engagement
Wait.
needs
So
to be about procreating. Sometimes, like what
so
happens in
you're
evolution, since you just wanted to talk about it, monkeys and lions will engage in homosexual behavior because it strengthens the overall community. It strengthens the bond.
wait. So you're telling me that the male monkeys doing it are strengthening the community? That's your main
That's the
objection?
evolutionary explanation as to why they do it. Yeah.
Well, how do you think they came about through evolution? Was it through that,
It
or
doesn't
was it
matter.
through? Or was it kind of does?
We've
matter.
evolved to be more social creatures. Now, again, you're believing for some reason that every single sexual encounter must be to procreate. This just doesn't make sense. Not in humans, and not in actual nature.
Wait, it must be it must be open to procreation.
No,
I didn't say it must.
it doesn't have to be open to it. And this is the problem.
Yeah, well,
You have no
that's
justification for this
disagreeing.
other than because God says so. And at the end of the day, I just don't care. I don't care what your God says. I think that your God sounds like a fucking idiot.
Well, what I believe is faith. I don't think that you have to have a complete material justification for a faith and a metaphysical being. That makes no
Okay,
sense.
sure.
Because if you could reason to it, right, there would be no merit in faith.
Yeah, well, I don't think
And that
faith has any merit. I think that faith is like a bedtime
yeah,
story
but that's
people tell
well,
themselves
yeah,
to
that's just
cope.
well, that's just because we fundamentally disagree, right? But I think that what you're looking
We
for
don't just
as
disagree on the
somebody,
faith thing. We disagree on the
well,
fact that you're saying because God says so, homosexuality is a perversion against God's divine covenant, and that's your justification for preaching that being gay is a sin, which ultimately results in tangible harm to gay people on this earth. And I never understand the
how does that have a tangible harm to gay
because you
people?
preaching and preaching these backwards beliefs that being gay is a sin ultimately contributes to more societal stigma around gay people. It's even religious reasons why the Trump administration tried to restrict gay people from being able to adopt so that the adoption agencies could have religious freedom. And this is something I never understand with you people, which is you believe that at the end of our life, God is going to judge us for this life, but yet you seem
Yeah.
intent on making this life worse for some people.
Well, I want them to become saved, right? So
I
I wish
know,
the
I
good
know.
of
Yes, if
others,
only
right?
they had faith to
So
just stop being gay, figure out
no,
how to not be
you're right.
genetic. I got it, dude.
I should actively support people doing something that is against the beliefs of against what they should do in accordance with God's
No, you
word.
should change your beliefs because they're stupid
Just
and
so they can
wrong.
feel better. Just so they can
No,
feel
it's not so
better,
they feel
right?
better.
That
It's so
makes
that
sense.
the world can be a better place, and that children who currently need homes can actually have a family.
So
That's
the
why.
world can be a better. Well, I don't think it's good for them to be adopted by two homosexual men.
Okay, yeah, I know you don't,
I
but I
mean
don't
but
care.
that's a different argument. But what I'm saying is yeah, I don't want to actively encourage sin. If I believe it's linked to sin, why would I actively encourage sin? That's what's
Because you
illogical.
need to change the fact that you believe it is a sin. If
Okay, wait. So
you
you're just
cannot
yeah, but this is
demonstrate
just
what qualifies it as a sin, then I'm not going to view it as a sin. And I understand that you need to just have faith that the gays are bad. But at
well,
the
you
end of
have
the
to have
day, I'm
some
not going
level
to
of
buy
faith
into
to
that.
understand sin. You have to have some level of faith to understand sin. That's part of
Okay.
the idea of Christianity. Like Christianity is not just something where you can look at things and just figure out exactly what's going on in like the entire metaphysical order. You have to
You don't
have
even know
some
there
level
is a
of faith.
metaphysical order. You just have
I have
faith.
faith that there is.
Faith,
I have
faith,
faith
faith,
that
faith,
there
faith.
is.
This is all your beliefs are. You can't argue them.
Yeah.
There's no
Well,
logic or reason
it's
here. It's just have faith.
it's called the Christian faith. It's not called
And the
the
Christian faith is
Christian the
fucking
Christian
delusion. The Christian faith that you just explained
epistemological.
to me is
Uh,
on par with schizophrenia, okay? So I appreciate you coming on the channel, I guess, and proving pretty much all of my points. I will have faith that one day you'll find your father. Goodbye. Johnson Pike, thank you for the $4 donation. If we did apologist versus non, what would you like to talk about? Problem of evil, specific issues like animal suffering, or the Old Testament historically? Usually I just go to the same thing, is the issue of morality, and then the fact that it relies on faith, and then the fact that you're trying to restrict other people's rights, even though it does no harm, on the basis of your imaginary friend, essentially. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click the bell so you get notified when I drop a new video.